Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, December 8th, and we have entered week 3 here. We have a new round of assignments and some sessions here to take a listen to. Let me go ahead and bring up Logic here. Nope, wrong session. Where's our review session? Let's try this. Looks like my audio files disappeared. What happened there? Well, we'll have to fix that. We'll have to import everybody's work. Let's see. Let's do this. I think I might have to jump back in here. Let's do this. Let's see. I have to go digging for a couple of files here. Sorry about this. Let's do this one, this one, this one. Let's try that. Let me reopen my session here. There we go. That looks a whole bunch better. That's what I get for moving files. So anyway, we have a review session. After we discuss our new round of assignments, you have submitted your week 2 assignments, which was your Angry Bots composition. So we have a couple of submissions there to take a listen to and do a bit of feedback and review of your week 2 assignments. So let's kind of figure out where we are with everything as we get into week 3 here. We've kind of hit full pace. Week 3's game composition or game project is our third and final game, our full game, because we have an opportunity to do revisions into week 4. But in week 4, we don't start up a brand new game composition project there because we don't have a week 5 to do revisions for that because, amongst other things, we have a nice, wonderful holiday break here coming up. So we have kind of week 3 peaks and culminates with this third game project. We still have a new composition in week 4, but it's not on the size and scale of the game projects each week. And that gives us time to kind of wrap everything up and make sure that everything is finalized for the month as we end it out. So we will be talking about the new week 3 game composition, production technique, and technical assignment. And as of Sunday, you turned in your week 2 submissions along with week 1 revisions. We're working through all of the grading for the week 2 assignments, and then I always want to give a heads up that we typically start out with the new assignments each week. So we're going to start out, you just turned in your week 2 game composition and production technique and technical assignment. We go through and grade those new assignments first before we go back and do the previous week's revisions. That way we'll keep it on track so that you can be doing revisions on the new works material while we go back and finish out week 1's revisions. And we do that just to keep everything on track, and every once in a while it will throw some folks off because they'll see new week 2 grades coming in before the week 1 revisions are finalized. So watch out for that. We'll talk about the just a kind of overview of the grading and how the assignments will work for the revisions for Angry Bots, and we'll talk about you did the sound design for 2D platformer. We'll discuss a little bit about that and the chiptune composition So we'll go over that as we do a review of the week 2 assignments in the second half. But first, we'll start out with the new assignments that hopefully you've taken an opportunity to download everything, check out each and every new assignment from each week, and that will get us rolling into the new material. So we have our third game project. It's a game called Palace of Arinthalion, and it is created and built in the Unity game engine. Each one of our games each week use that piece of software, and we will be talking about that as we kind of get into the second half of the month. In week 3 and week 4, we start discussing more of the technical process and how the WAV files that you've created actually make their way into the game. So one of the very cool things about the Unity game software is it has an asset store attached. And there's a lot of software that's doing this. Even Logic and Pro Tools have an online marketplace where you can access more material. I think that's a little bit more Avid's game right now. But it's a store where you can buy materials and get access to other downloadable content to build and work with. And for the Unity game engine, that means there's games and there's art and there is animations and models and all of these different visual aspects that go very nicely with all of our music and sound. So it is definitely something very cool to explore. There's a lot of free content. There's paid content on there also, but it gives you materials. Of course, there is audio and sound because a game developer or an artist would certainly want some audio aspect to their project. But of course, for us music and audio folks, we are looking for the visual side of things. And as stated here in the chat, David, and it's free, the Unity game engine, absolutely. What's one of the wonderful things discussing this side of the industry and the game industry, all of the software is free. And we'll talk about what that means. Well, there's not too much more explanation other than go download it, it's free, but how that works as a business model overall in the game industry. Kind of compare it to the idea if Avid, Pro Tools, and Apple's Logic, and all of Native Instruments synths and Waves plugins and every plugin synth, if all of that stuff was free to get access to, but kind of a different model of when you start purchasing it and buying their product. So we'll get into some of that discussion. But the underlying idea is there's all of these assets out there that you can use to learn and explore and demo your audio work. So there is this very cool, it's basically like a game level. It's an environment called Palace of Arinthalion. That's always a mouthful for me to say all the way through these lectures. So I just end up calling it the Palace game or Palace project. But as with all of our games, they are demo games that are available for free through the Unity game engine. But none of them had an implementation for the music, of how the music is going to operate. And each week, each game has a different use for your music. Yes, in all of these game compositions, the final result is basically a handful of WAV files and a screenshot, but the way that those WAV files are used is unique in every single game, and not only does it have a different musical approach with instrumentation and style and genre, but it also has a unique implementation of that music, of what happens to that music, how it's used in the game. And so in week 1, our main focus, or the concept for your music, was the idea of intros, main loops, and endings. Sometimes that's also known as a start, loop, and a stop. 3 different parts that basically represent the beginning, middle, and end. Last week with Angry Bots, Our focus was the idea of ambient and action, or multiple game states that you transition between, where ambient is in a lower state of intensity and level and pacing from the music, and it represents a lower state of action in the game. It's probably exploration or trying to find your way through to the next part of the story, or solving a puzzle, or some indeterminate amount of time that needs to pass before. Then we have a little bit more clear the action cues, which represent the danger and the battle in the game. So, of course, with each week, each game has a new approach to the music. The use for your music this week, of course, is going to be unique. We are going to be talking about the ideas of horizontal and vertical music, horizontal and vertical orchestration, or horizontal and vertical music system. These are the ideas of how the music is built and created and used for the game. So far, all of our games have had this horizontal approach to the music. And when I say horizontal, the main thing I'm referring to is, imagine a single track in a DAW where you have multiple regions that are laid side to side or horizontally stretched across your timeline, and each one of those represents an individual piece of music, and the game only plays one of them at a time, and it's constantly switching them back and forth to determine what you hear overall. So it's like your timeline or your ruler inside of your DAW jumping around horizontally left and right to the correct piece of music. Well, this week our game is going to take on a vertical approach. Your music is going to be vertically layered on top of each other. Now you can imagine a multi-track DAW session. Let me go ahead and bring up this, where your music is vertically laid out, one on top of each other, and they are all going to play at the same time. And they have a possibility of playing one or any two of them at the same time, any three of them at the same time, or all four of them. So this week you are going to create, the end result will be 4 wave files. Those wave files are going to be played at the same time in the game. Even though that they're being played at the same time, that does not necessarily mean that you hear all of them at the same time. So you have the possibility of any 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them playing at the same time. So if they're going to play at the same time, the challenge here is, how do we create a piece of music that has multiple layers that can play together simultaneously? And we want to avoid any sort of collision of pitch or rhythm. We want to avoid dissonance, and we want to avoid any sort of clashing notes or rhythmic values. So we need to have 4 pieces of music that kind of join and fit together and can be played congruently, simultaneously, or they can be played on their own. So we'll talk about how that works and how that is going to be built in your DAW, but consider a vertical music system versus a horizontal music system, and we'll discuss what that means as we go through week 3 here. All right, so let's talk about the game itself. It is an open world fantasy game. Let's see what that means, and let's go ahead and bring the game up itself. That looks good. So, an open world fantasy game. An open world game means that it feels like the player is in control of the story and can go off in any sort of direction. Compare that against a much more linear kind of gameplay or style. Lots of games, and has much more of a history in earlier games, were very much based off of levels, and still are, where you start at the beginning of the level and you fight your way through the level and you get to the end, and then you go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. And as games have advanced and become have better technology and resources, they've been able to hide the idea of levels pretty well, and it feels much more like a linear storyline. But you still are starting at point A, and there's a very limited path to navigate to get to point B, and then move to point C all the way till point Z when you finish the game. And there's a very linear path to go from point to point through the game. So this has also this has kind of been met with the idea of an open world game, where an open world game, which is also well, that's kind of cool. Pans with my mouse. Sorry. An open world game is where the player or the hero of the story is kind of just dropped into the beginnings of that story and is put into a world or environment where they feel like they have a lot more control over the different directions that they can head. Meaning that they don't have to attack the story and go from one distinct point to the next in a linear kind of progression. They can go, and there's all sorts of different plot points, storylines, different random encounters. They can start and go down different paths of maybe good or evil, or different jobs or character classes, or just all sorts of different things that are lined up for them. Here in the chat, quests, very common, where you start out, you typically have a lower level in powers, and you stumble across different quests or different parts of the story where they send you out on different adventures. Go defeat this, or go save and rescue this, or go find this secret treasure or weapon or whatever it is. And you gather experience and powers and weapons, and you get stronger and better over the course of the game. And there can be a storyline. There is a very distinct progression through the game, but that doesn't mean you have to do that or go any sort of order. And a lot of this is based in the history of fantasy games, or fantasy world, or fantasy movies, or fantasy books, which would be typically the world of magic and kings and queens and kingdoms and wizards and dragons and spells and just all sorts of fantastical ideas and concepts that have its history through Lord of the Rings, or has its history through Dungeons and Dragons in a game format, and early versions, Legend of Zelda, in a video game format. And nowadays there are things like the Elder Scrolls or Skyrim. The Witcher is a very popular game out there. Dark Souls is another very popular version of that. Dragon's Age, League of Legends. There's just a lot of these kind of fantastical worlds that you are a part of, and they also are typically pretty large open environments, or at least they feel in that direction. So, and then another kind of category of that is what Rockstar Games does with Grand Theft Auto, which is a much more modern version. People go in, you play Grand Theft Auto, and you don't ever play through the actual storyline. You just have fun in the open world doing all sorts of wild and crazy things. So in this game that we have to work on this week, kind of is modeled after that idea of open directional kind of open-ended gameplay, where you start out in this kind of palace. It is based off of kind of an old world feel that really has no time, but it feels kind of ancient overall. And there are 4 doorways, and they are each marked with 4 ancient elements. I'm sure probably shouldn't be up here, but I'm sure that's very sacred. But We have earth, wind, fire, and water, and those four represent four different paths through the game, four different parts of a storyline, four different quests or adventures, just four different directions that the player can head. Now, like all of the rest of our games, this is not a full and complete game. There's nothing going on, really. There's no storyline, there's no characters, there's not really much to do except for to interact with the music. So it's an environment to show and demonstrate our music, and it has a very distinct concept and use for our music. And it's really indicative of the kinds of things that you might get early on in the project, where once they actually have a working version of a game to play with, you will get more and more environments and more things to do. And they'll say, look at this amazing palace, and there's all sorts of, they'll tell you the story of what's going to happen in here, and they'll say, yeah, but there's nothing happening yet. We haven't created the characters, we haven't created the storyline, but it gives you something to look at and inspires you to create the music. So our purpose here, or the way our music is going to be set up, is we are going to have 4 wave files that represent each one of these 4 different directions, the 4 different parts of the story, the 4 different ancient elements, and those wave files have the possibility of playing at the same time. So the challenge here is the player has the ability to listen to any of these pieces of music and turn them on and off and interact with them separately in whatever way that they want. So whenever you walk out any one of these doorways, this text prompt pops up and it says press E to engage. And by doing that, it will start, or you will start hearing a piece of music. Let me make sure that I can do this without blasting us, and I don't want to randomly turn on a piece of music. Let's see. I am going to turn this down just a little bit, which should probably also turn down my microphone, but I can also make sure that it's not at some ridiculous listening level. All right, let's check that. And, well, let's just see what happens here. No, I think I want to do this. And let's try. Okay, so you walk out and you press E. Oop, it stops when I'm out of it. All right, so give me a heads up in the chat. Can you hear that music when I'm in the game? And can you still hear me and all that? All right, so I'll press E here, and notice that you have the visuals of the torches that turn on and off. And I think it is a 3-second fade as it fades in the music. Press E, it turns on the music, and you press E again and it fades out. So the player has control over which pieces of music that they want to hear. So let me go through and turn on and off each one of these and discuss the overall purpose or the theme of each cue. Starting with the Earth cue, this represents the hero and the hero's journey. This is kind of the base layer. This might be the start of the game. It's one of the a main theme, maybe. Well, I don't want to say the main theme of the whole game, but the hero's theme. It represents the positive, heroic, adventurous, idealistic theme that the player is heading off onto their journey. And let's go ahead and place something here. And I'll just, I can't call up can't call up Logic at the same time. Let me do this. So this is what's happening in the game. Here's the Earth theme right here. Right here. Oh no, we can't hear that. Let's do this. Soundflower. All right, one more time. All right, that is the piece of music that is heard when you jump in, when you turn on the Earth cue. So the pieces of the music files or the WAV files that you will be creating, there will be 4 WAV files, and they're each going to be 16 or 32 bars long, however long you want your progression to be. And the key here is that they all need to start at the same time, they all need to end at the same time, and they're going to loop together. And that is the way that the game keeps everything in sync. When you first start the game, the music starts playing. When the game starts, the music starts, but all of the faders are down. Really, the volume is set to 0 or negative infinity for each one of the pieces of music. And when you walk out and press the letter E, it actually, over 3 seconds, is going to fade up a piece of music. Right? So, same sort of idea here. If I hit E, fades it out. If I hit E again, fades it in. And notice that it doesn't start in the same place. It always picks up wherever it is, because it's not muted, it's just playing at 0 or negative infinity volume in the background. So let me go over here and stop this. So the Earth cue represents the heroes, everything positive, everything heroic, everything adventurous. We'll have to certainly talk about the instrumentation and what instruments and melodic themes work well for each one of these cues, but I think I'll start with how all of the WAV files function first. Here in the chat, oops, go back over here. Got to get better at my switching. David, oh, look, it follows my mouse even outside of there. There it goes. David, since they are all vertical to one another, can we do modulation at the 17th bar if we choose to? Or would you recommend against that? So if you wanted to go, if you were doing a 32 bar phrase and at bar 17 you did a modulation to another key, that's fine, but there's a little preparation that you need to consider. All 4 of them need to modulate in the same direction to the new key so that they will stay and not clash. And then you need to get back to the previous key before it loops. Either before it loops or use the loop to modulate back. And then it's going to constantly go back and forth. You can certainly make that work. That also works for tempo changes. If you wanted to do that, if you go to a new key or a new tempo, you always have to realize it's either going to just drop back to the previous one or you're going to have to move your way back. So that's perfectly fine. It's just, it takes more preparation. I typically suggest just maintaining the same key and the same tempo, number 1 through all 4 of the cues and all the way through the 16 or 32 bars. All right. So Earth cue represents all that is positive and heroic with the hero's journey. The wind cue. The wind is going to represent danger or stealth or the activity right before the player engages with the enemy. So in lots of games, there's often an element where you recognize that the enemy is out there, or maybe even you don't, but the music is trying to warn you. It gets all creepy and dark and weird, and typically has really low-end elements and maybe has some elements in the higher ranges that kind of are maybe a little bit more dissonant and can throw you off and just give you an unsettling feel. But these cues are going to represent either the player trying to recognizes the danger and they are trying to act stealthy and sneak around the danger and avoid the danger as long as possible, or it is that sense of dread or warning that there is something out there. Maybe you don't recognize it yet, but things are about to get bad. So this is going to represent also the kind of peak of tension right before everything is going to break out into the full action or battle. So the wind cue often will have different elements and different registers that give you a different feeling overall, but you may not need as specific or direct of percussion or melody as it is for the earth cue. The earth cue is often punctuated by really strong melodies and really just classic compositional techniques, a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of pace, kind of an upbeat feel overall, which is then totally broken by the creepy or dread that you feel from the wind as the danger looms close. All right, so I guess let me work with both of these here. So the player has the opportunity, they come out and they turn off, they interact and engage and hear the earth cue. Then I'll bring in the wind cue. And no matter where I turn it on, it's always going to work. Everything always stays in sync because they're all constantly playing together. If I come back here, turn this one off, it fades away, and you hear the lower register from the wind. Wind instrumentation works quite well also. And that will get us into the fire cue. So let me go ahead and turn this one on. We'll see that, again, no matter where we are, it'll just fade completely in sync and on beat. Because it is. It's just playing in the background. Go back and turn off the wind cue. So the fire cue represents the action or the battle itself. So if the wind cue is everything that happens right before the battle, it's the stealth element trying to avoid the danger, while fire is you didn't avoid it, it's right there, you have to engage and battle the enemy. So your fire cue is going to be your biggest and strongest cue, the loudest one. It's going to have the most instrumentation and the strongest instrumentation, often big brass and string sections and large orchestral percussion work very well. So a fire cue is going to be rely a lot more on the power and the percussion of the cue rather than the instrumentation. Rather than maybe direct melodies. Each cue should have some representation of melody in it. It should have instrumentation that represent, often it needs percussion. There should be instrumentation in the lower registers, mids, and certainly highs for melodic content. But each cue also kind of weighs a bit more on different aspects, where the earth cue is going to be heavily melodic, the fire cue is heavily percussive and rhythmic and strong, the wind cue is pulling out different kind of feeling of tension and kind of maybe a little bit of percussion that emphasizes the pace that is as the player kind of tries to creep around the enemy. And then the water cue. The water cue is going to represent the emotional quality of the story, the twists and turns and the ups and downs of the storyline. So there's kind of two ways you can go with this. The water cue can represent all that is good and happy and positive and like love and family and passion and falling in love and the emotional highs of the storyline. or it can represent all of the emotional lows. It can represent loss or longing or sorrow or death, or like you lost the game, or you lost the mission, or you lost the battle, or any sort of just the opposite ends of the spectrum. Either one of them, should really just kind of pull at your heartstrings. It should be a very strong emotional melody. This one's going to rely heavily on the melody also. Depending on the direction you go, it can be either a major or a minor key that is going to blend well with the overall theme that you want to hit. So, I don't know, passionate strings, winds. Probably doesn't really need too much percussion. I don't know, you could emphasize with some timpani and some cymbals, but each one of these represents a different direction. Let's listen to another example here. Let's kind of talk our way through this. So when you first walk out of, when you first start the game, the music starts, but everything is down. And you walk out of the earth cue and you turn this one on and it fades in. Here in the chat, Angela, so we're choosing either good vibes or bad, not both for the water. Correct. Yeah, you just go one direction or the other for that particular cue. And just as long as you fill one role or the other. And they can certainly end up being a similar idea where it's a strong emotional melody, but certainly the theme that you choose will have influence. All right, so strong brass melody through here. There's a bit of percussion that establishes the pace. A strong progression to follow. And your earth cue is often would be kind of heard first in the game, and it establishes that strong progression. Here's the wind cue. All right, so there's a little bit of pulse. It's very light from the percussion. Some interesting effects. Strong, or just kind of long, sustained pads. A little hint of that melody that kind of works off the earth cue here. They're all in the same key. They're all at the same tempo. They all start at the same time. They all loop at the same time, so they all fit together. Here's the fire cue. Alright, so a bit of a progression from the low brass, big, strong drums. All the cues loop nicely, loop seamlessly. The water cue. Alright, with the lead string line. Each cue fits its own theme, has unique instrumentation, has its own unique melodic idea. There's no clashing notes, no clashing rhythms. Each one is identifiable on its own. It has enough instrumentation that it can be supported on its own. Yet when you bring everything together, it sounds, they all fit and sonically work together, and there's enough instrumentation overall that it creates a strong density of tracks. Here in the chat, David, did I hear the drums in the earth and the fire cues? I don't know that they're the same drums. Let's see, I don't think they're the same. But yes, drums in both of those. Yeah, this is kind of a halftime kind of feel. All right, so let's talk about the best way of approaching this composition, because it becomes very easy to run out of options and combinations here. You can end up what I refer to as musically painting yourself into a corner where you only have so many notes, you only have in that key, you only have so many rhythmic subdivisions that work. And if you start building layer by layer, one by one, instrument by instrument, you might run out of combinations or run out of ideas, and you want to be able to make sure that everything fits together. So, the way that I suggest you approach this composition is what's known as a top-down approach, where you focus on the overall chord progression, the overall structure of the composition first for all four parts. You kind of think about how everything is going to work together as a whole, and start dividing it down down to the details. So basically, think about the overall composition and then work your way down to the instrument level, versus the other way around, which is known as a bottom-up approach. And this is often how a lot of people will compose, and I do the same thing for a lot of different types of music. Especially if I'm a lot of beat-driven music where I'm kind of I establish an initial rhythm and I build up from there. So a bottom-up approach is, okay, I've got a kick and snare, so I'm going to write a kick snare, and then I'm going to throw a hi-hat on it, then I'm going to throw a bass line on it, and then I'm going to throw a pad or a key part on that, and then I'm going to record a guitar line, then I'm going to add instrument by instrument and build it up to its final product. And that is a very useful and common approach. But for this, where you have multiple layers that are going to play separately but also work together, you end up having or creating musical puzzle pieces that, if they're in the same key and they're the same tempo, then they should be able to fit together, and they should probably follow the same fundamental progression to make it a bit easier to connect everything and have them work together. So, for this top-down approach, I suggest that you start with a piano patch, and you start with just creating the chord progression. I typically use, I mean, you could really use whatever you want, but a piano makes a whole lot of sense because you've got notes in the lower range and the mids and the highs, and you can write chords and you can write melodies all in the same instrument, and you can figure out your foundation. I guess one thing that I haven't thrown out there, but I definitely want to point out, is the instrumentation of this composition is going to be limited to acoustic orchestral instrumentation. All of my demos have been that way, but I definitely want to specify that you are restricted to acoustic orchestral instrumentation. That means no synthesizers, no drum machines. Now, granted, all of our sources are sample libraries and the contact library. You might have your own strings or brass or woodwind libraries. And I understand it is still digital and all that, but at least the instrumentation that we are mimicking or working with is in the acoustic orchestral realm. So yeah, brass, string, woodwinds, orchestral percussion work very, very well for all of this. So you keep it with that instrumentation. You follow a fundamental progression. You determine, I'm going to do a 16-bar phrase, or I'm going to do a 32-bar phrase, however you want it to work. And you pound out your chord progression on the piano. And your chord progression is a combination of 3-part harmonies or 4-part harmonies, and it gives you the key, the tempo, the chords, and the basics, the foundation, or the fundamentals of what your music is going to be. And if you know, if you figure out the chord progression, then you know, and the tempo and the key, you know that no matter what instrument you choose, no matter what notes that they play within those restrictions, it's going to fit together and it's going to work. So tempo, key, time signature, guess I should throw that in there, all should be the same. You have the same chord progression. They all follow the same chord progression. And then melodies. Each one of them is going to have its own unique melodic voice, its own that fits the overall theme and musical aesthetic for that cue. So if I have four wave files, four pieces of music, and they all have to be in the same key, they all have to be in the same time signature, they all have to be, they start at the same time, loop the same time, they're all the same length, they all follow the same chord progression, then what's different? And how do I make them unique? How do I make them not all just be the same thing? Well, that comes down to your choice of instrumentation. Each cue is going to have its own grouping of instruments that kind of gives it its own unique voice for the music. Its own melody, so with its voice, it speaks its own unique ideas. And with the chord progression, each cue, each piece of music, each layer of music is going to have its own voices of the chord progression, meaning that you don't have to put the same 3 and 4 voices, all 3 or 4 voices of each chord in every single cue. Using different voicings and octaves and unisons across the different instruments gives you the combinations and the variation for your different cues. And those ideas will give you the unique elements, unique instrumentation, unique voicings of the harmonies, and unique melodies to create the overall vibe or aesthetic or theme of each cue. The hero's theme is going to be heavily melodic. Typically, I always think of, with the earth cue, I think of the town minstrel or the roaming bards that have lutes and harps and hand drums. They're a small group of performers or musicians that carry their instruments around. So maybe some stringed instruments, lutes, harps, can't even speak, lutes, harps, guitars, maybe a fiddle, wind instruments, different flutes and clarinets and oboes. You can have some small percussion, handheld percussion. So it should be just a couple of instrument voices. Each layer needs to have at least 4 or 5 instruments so that it has enough density on its own, so that when you combine it together, that ends up to be 20 or 25 or 30 different voices that all can work together. With the earth cue, it's meant to be individual musicians. So no large ensembles, groups, string sections, brass or wind sections. Individual strings, brass, and flute. The wind cue represents the tension and danger on the eventuality or on the horizon. So, like I said, low-end instruments, cellos and low trombones and French horns work well. Low timpanis, just a small or a kind of an emphasis, a pulse to the cue. Maybe some tension strings at the high end or other winds. Less of a need for percussion there. The fire cue is just going to be the power, the strength of all 4 of them. So big timpanis, bass drums, cymbals, marching, rolling snares, big brass sections, trumpets and French horns and trombones and strong string sections all work well. I think a very maybe a martial or militaristic kind of feel, very strong and powerful overall. And then the water cue, all of the emotional layers, so strings and harps and maybe a harpsichord or a piano, woodwinds, strong melodic instruments work well through there. All right, so start out with the piano, write your main chord progression, figure out your melodies, and then once you figure out harmony and melody, that establishes the composition. The composition, the notes themselves are going to be the most difficult aspect, or not necessarily the most difficult, but the part that has the most possibility for causing problems, right? Dissonant notes, notes out of key, really off rhythms can cause havoc between multiple layers that need to play together. Once you establish the different parts of your harmony and your different melodies, hold on just a sec. Excuse me. Once you establish the different voices of your harmony, your melodies, then you can figure out what instruments play the different voices of your harmony, what instruments represent your different melodic lead instruments, combinations that work together across different cues. Then you establish instrumentation after the composition. Then it's just more of the technical aspects, mixing, looping, bouncing, all of those. Here in the chat, so the template we made for this week's assignment won't work then. We use ensembles for most brass and string patches. Well, that certainly works for the fire cues. You can use them for there, but if you will add other instrument layers as needed to that template. But the template is there as the foundation for this composition, and I certainly encourage you to do the production technique first to get you access to a lot of wide palette of sounds. Then you'll need to add and subtract according to what you need, but it gives you a quick access to all of the different parts. So what else can I talk about? We talked about the how the music is set up, how it's going to play back in the game. We talked about the four different cues and what the four different ancient elements and what they represent musically. We talked about the instrumentation of each. Each one should have its own melodic voice and unique instrumentation. We listened to the examples. Let me see if there's anything else. Let me bring up the PDF here just to make sure. Oops, where'd it go? Nope. This one. All right, so game overview talks a bit about how the game will work, how the game and the files play together, discussion of preliminary overview of each one of the different cues, control of the game, some reference tracks, indication of the instrumentation. Here's our asset list, our shortest one overall, but really kind of more nuanced approach to how it all works. Specifications of all the files, screenshots and descriptions of each one of the four cues and four pieces of music, and screenshots. Okay. Looks like we hit on all of the points there. If you have any more questions as we go along, or certainly through the week here, let me know. And we'll move on to our technical assignment here. I'm going to take a quick pause, just take a short, couple second long break. And if you have any questions, go ahead and post it up. Actually, here we go. Angela, this is a technical question. Can we create mono files like in the percussion and bounce them as stereo overall? All right, I'll hit on that here in just a sec. All right, so mono, percussion, and stereo. Percussion is mono, right? In the natural world, it is. You have one snare and it comes from one point. So we're going to create, let me just show you real quick. What ends up happening is your instruments are mono, your drums are mono. They just come out stereo, they get panned left and right. So you probably don't need, what am I doing? I'm going to drum kits. Or actually, I probably want to do multi-out. Right, if I had a drum kit here, here's my output. It's stereo because you get a pan, but the sound, like the snare sound, is mono, and it comes out, and then you can pan it in a stereo field. The wonderful thing about the drum kit designer is if you do multiple outputs, it gives you like kick, snare, toms, hi-hats, and so on. And so you can get access to the individual ones, and my kick goes up the middle, and my snare goes maybe off to the left a little bit. Now we're going to do this from drummer's perspective. Snare goes off to the right a little bit. My hi-hat kind of goes off to the left. And then when you bounce this, it's stereo because it's a whole bunch of mono sounds in a stereo field as you bounce out. Can we create mono files like in the percussion and bounce them out as stereo? Yeah. Going from mono to stereo means you're either panning it or you copy the same thing in both left and right. And that's probably not the best idea because that is dual mono. If you have a mono file and you need stereo and the only way you can do it is put the same thing in both left and right, if you have to do it, then that certainly is fine, whatever. But really you're just doubling the overall file size and kind of wasting resources. So the main answer to that is you're taking mono instruments or mono drum sounds and panning them in stereo. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about our technical assignment here. And our technical assignment is going to be quite similar to last week, where as we progress week by week, we will always want to go back and revisit and complete the sound design for the previous week's game. So last week we did 2D platformer, and you had a series of 18 files. Here we jump up all the way to 22. But we have, this one's fun. I mean, it's robots and explosions and mechanical stuff. And so there's some pretty entertaining types of sounds. The overall purpose is and result is going to be just the same, just like last week. Let me go ahead and find... Oh. Where'd my technical assignment go? Is that all of them? Guess I'll have to open it up. Let's see here. Week 3 sound design PDFs. There we go. Your technical assignment for Angry Bots, doing the sound design. So again, I would suggest that you take all of the original sounds provided with the game and import them into a Logic session and use them as reference. There's screenshots and a description of each one of the files, and down here towards the bottom you have the asset list. So we're going to go ahead and take a listen to some of these games. Remember, the way that you always can access the files, if you, let's see here, if you take a copy of the game, here's Angry Bots, and you right click on the file and do Show Package Contents, in there, it will show you a folder called Contents. And you double click on that and you go to data. And in data, you will find streaming assets. And in there, you will find a sound effects folder. And these are all the files you will create. Reference them, right? You'll find that those are all the same ones listed here. Reference them for their file names. They should be named exactly like this. And then you can just dump them all into a Logic session to listen to how they should sound. And we're just going to go through these and take a listen to them real quick. Here also in the chat, I create track stacks for each of the sounds I'm building. Absolutely, having some sort of way of organizing the session and putting them together, because each sound is probably going to have some different elements to it. It's not like a piece of music where it's the same drum kit all the way through. You got different layers and different sounds, and you can certainly organize them all together. So let's make sure again that these don't completely blast. Let's see, before I play any of them, the first thing I would do as you're looking over the list and as you're checking out the original the original audio files, hello, go away, thank you. Look for similar sounds that are of a similar type or category overall. You will find there's a lot of explosions in this game, and there's also a lot of doors in this game and a lot of robot kind of sounds. So let's see what we have here. Let's do explosions first. Right? I think I'm pretty sure you guys can hear that. Let me know if you can't hear it. Okay. So each one of the robots can be destroyed, right? So the buzzer has a destroyed explosion. The patrol mech has a destroyed explosion. This is the big robot. The spider has a destroyed explosion. The spider is basically a bomb on legs, so it also has a self-destruct, which is an explosion. I mean, I don't like that one. It's kind of boring. What else? There's a missile. The big robot shoots missiles at you that explode. So, I mean, you could just, when you're searching, you could search the weststarmusic.com site. You can search freesound.org or all sorts of sources on the internet, and just go out and find a whole bunch of explosion sounds and then bring them back in and edit them down and make them, layer them and make them work together. There's a lot of doors. Here's airlock door open. Airlock door closed. Sometimes you can get away with the close is just the reverse of the open. Sometimes that doesn't work, but you can use similar types of sounds. There's interior door open, close. There's a locked door. Oh, locked door. Which sounds like a hum. There's some ambiances. There's a rain. There's a hum when you're inside. What else? Flying buzzer zap electric. It's a cool weapon sound. Alert sound. Everything has an alert when they wake up. So whenever you get recognized and it comes after you and attacks, each one of them has an alert sound. Actually, I guess the buzzer doesn't. The spider has an alert sound. What else? Footsteps for the patrol mech. 1 and 2. I think those are the exact same sounds, honestly. What else? Missile explosion, shoot missile, alert sound. Oh, here's the no. That's the alert. We already did that one. Proximity. That's really easy. That's a beep. When you play the game, the closer the spider gets to you, it just plays that beep over and over again. It gets faster and faster. It's really good for building tension, but the original sound is just a beep. It just loops it over and over. Player getting hit. This could be you. All of these alert sounds. This could this could be like a robot voice, like attack or proximity or something like that. I've heard some really cool things with individuals using their voice for some of these effects. Player shooting. Right, that's a real strong machine gun kind of sound. And I think there's what, how many? I don't know. Whoops, sorry. There's like 4 or 8 hits in there. I would actually use the direct timing. I think the timing of the shots in that file goes along with the animation. So you want to watch out for that. Terminal hacked, just like a computer beep sound, or else I've heard some cool voices for that where it just says terminal hacked. Whatever. So fun kind of sound design, makes the project even better, makes it completely your own. Yeah. Can't get better than explosions and robots. It's a lot of fun. All right. There's our technical assignment. Oh, again, as you finish your audio files, as you finish your music and your sound effects, you go back into contents, you go back into data, streaming assets. Delete all of the original sound effects and put your sound effects in there. Delete all the music. Actually, I think yours is blank. And put your music in there. Always test out your music, test out your sound effects, and make sure that what you kind of expected when you're bouncing out of your session, what you expected your music to sound like, is actually how it plays and ends up sounding in the game. Cool. All right. Hello. There we go. That'll get us going on the sound design, and our third project here, the production technique. This will have you using Logic and Contact to create an orchestral template session that is intended to be used to as the initial start session for your game composition this week. So I do encourage you to start out creating this production template or this orchestral template and using it for your composition. The source of this assignment really came from when people were working and starting on this kind of fantasy orchestral composition. One of the biggest deficiencies that I heard from the submissions was the choice of instrumentation, or the quality of the instrumentation, of the sounds, and the articulations, or really the lack of articulations used. So this orchestral template will have you creating a session. Will have you creating a session that has all or a number of orchestral instruments with different articulations accessible very, very quickly. By all you have to do is record on a particular track, and you immediately hear that particular instrument with that articulation. So setting up and getting quick access to the correct sounds to get started and working as fast as possible. So templates are a very, very handy tool overall, because as you continue working, either working on the same project that requires a similar instrumentation and style, or you are working on multiple different types of projects, and so this might be an orchestral template, but eventually you create templates for orchestral, electronic, hip-hop, rock, sound effects, mixing, audio recording, media, just whatever similar type of template or setup that you use over and over and over again that you can turn into a template. If you're like me, when you start out and you want to create some music, you have this amazing idea for a piece of music that you want to do. So you open up Logic and you create a new session, and then you create some tracks in that session, and on those tracks you load up the instruments that you want. Then you go into the instruments and you start getting lost through all the presets, and you listen to all the cool sounds, and you start figuring out what sounds you're actually going to use. Then you want to name your tracks. You want to organize things. So you start, you got to name everything and set it up, get some of your plugins set up. You choose some plugins that are useful for you. You want a little bit of reverb, so you get an aux send set up, and you have to route your tracks to that reverb. And you set up some groups to help facilitate the mix. You add some overall processing, and just getting everything set up into a usable format will take some time, right? It can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes or longer just to get started. Then you want to record something, so you have to set up a microphone, you set up your preamp, and you route it, and you get it, create input tracks, and you route it to the output. And it can take a while every single time that you start up to get going. Here in the chat, Angela, I always get lost listening to presets and the different instruments. Absolutely. That's one of the best parts and one of the biggest time-consuming parts of all of this technology. Wow, it's cool. Think about how many thousands of sounds we have access to at the fingertips, which also means that you can get completely lost in all of the sounds trying to figure out what you actually want. An orchestral template works just a little bit clearer overall because there is a kind of a standard of instrumentation of an orchestra that's been established for a very long time that we can use for our particular template, right? A synthesizer template gets a little bit more difficult because who knows which of the thousands of presets that you want first time every single time. But with an orchestral template, I can identify groups of instruments that I need to work together. So you will notice that this is 56 tracks. There's 56 instrument tracks. There's really just 14 instruments, but each one of them has 4 different articulations. So you should be pretty familiar with articulations, and you should be using articulations in your compositions. Certainly, we got the pretty standard ones of sustain and staccato, which will be probably more common ones that you use. Forte piano and sforzando. Forte piano basically starts out louder and goes softer. Sforzando starts out softer and goes louder. And then we have different groupings of instruments. We have all of the winds, piccolos, flute, oboe, clarinets, bassoon, contrabassoon. We have all the brass, French horn, trumpets, trombones, and tubas. We have strings with violins, violas, cellos, and double bass. So having those different groups of instruments. Now, there's a lot of instruments, a lot of tracks, a lot of naming. This can get kind of tedious to set everything up and route it all around. But that's kind of the point of a template, is that you take some time, you set it all up once, you get it perfectly how you want it to work, and then you save it and use it as a template, and it makes the whole process starting out over and over again a whole lot smoother. So a couple of things that I want to point out while working on this assignment. Number 1 would be there is a mini slide GCP Week 3 production template PDF, which is basically goes through slide by slide and step by step talking about how to create this template using Contact and Logic. So definitely reference this as you go through. It should make the process easier. And honestly, as you go, you really set up and redo the same thing over and over again. So it's really just about the flow and then going through all the other instruments. David, quick question about, go ahead and post that up for the template. So definitely want to reference that, and then I want to talk about how to go through and create. We'll just do one of these instruments. David, when it says to pick a multi-timbral instrument, it doesn't say anything about how many timbres. It just says to make 4 tracks. It needs to be 4 parts, which is slide 6 here. create 4 new multi-timbral software instrument tracks. So these multi-timbral, when you do that, it's going to give you the choice of, I'll recreate these 4 piccolos. So I create new tracks. Software. Now, you want one track with 4 parts. And what this does is it gives you one instrument with 4 MIDI channels routed to it. As opposed to, you don't want to do either none and then 4 tracks here, or 1 and 4. You want one track with 4 parts. That way you get individual MIDI channels going into one instrument. So when I do that, notice, I'll drag these right up here. Notice that this all says instrument 1. All 4 of these tracks are instrument 1, but they go to different MIDI channels. That also gets it into just one mixer channel here, and it shows up as one instrument named in the mixer channel in the track. Here in the chat, looks like I'm doing the assignment then. I did 1 and 4 and it seemed to work. If you do it that way, then it's going to give you an individual instrument for every single channel. And you would have to load up many, many more instances of contact overall. Try it the other way though. It does seem, yeah, if I do like this, well, let me do this. If I do 4 tracks with 1 part in it, you'll get multiple instruments here. Oops. Well, no, I get 1 instrument. Let's see. Okay, my instrument. MIDI channel 1. No, they all go to the same one. I think you might be fine. That's the main thing. Look at your look at all the tracks in your session, and if they all go, if a particular instrument all goes to the same, like instrument 1, then you're fine. Let me do that again. So I create 1, and I do 1 track with 4 multi-timbral parts. 1 track with 4 multi-timbral parts. Come on. Software instrument 1 with 4. Create. I get 1, 1, 1, 1. Why does it pop up at 2 there? Because it disappears when I do this. Okay. Whatever. So that's that is correct. And then if I do 4 tracks, each with 1, I guess it equals out the same thing. That's cool. 4 tracks with 1 multi-timbral part. It'll still give me the same thing. Yep, I think you're good. All right. So now what this does is I can name this piccolo. And if I can type piccolo, all 4 of these will be going to the same place. It still is one piccolo instrument, but they're going to have 4 different articulations. So this is going to be piccolo staccato. This one's going to be piccolo, and I'm just going to steal this name. Oops. Piccolo, and highlight this. This is for Zando. Piccolo forte piano. Copying and pasting is going to be your friend through all this, unless you just love typing the same thing over and over again. Oops. piccolo, sustain. All right, now 4 different articulations. If I go ahead and load up my instrument here, you are going to go into your native instruments and go to Contact, and you're going to use the Contact Factory library as your source for your sounds. It allows me to load up one instance of Contact, and all 4 of these are going to the same instance. Same instance of Contact, and I can go into Instruments, I can go into Orchestral, and in my Contact Factory library, I go into Woodwinds, and I find Piccolo. And I'm actually going to load that up 4 times over. And again, this is going to be sustain, forte piano, sforzando, and staccato. Now, all we need to do is notice that sustain, piccolo sustain, is going to instrument 1. This is instrument 1, this Contact, and it's going to MIDI channel 1. So my sustain here needs to be on MIDI channel 1, and it needs to be switched to sustain. Then forte piano is on MIDI channel 2. It nicely goes to the correct channel, but we need to switch to the right articulation. Switch that to forte piano, sforzando, switch that over on MIDI channel 3, and staccato on MIDI channel 4. And then all we have to do is, let me bring up my keyboard here. If I go to, I want to make sure we don't hear this. If I just click on MIDI channel 1, I got my sustain. If I just do the second one here, forte piano, all I have to do is arm the correct track, and it gives me the correct sound. The other thing here is I can layer multiple articulations together. Wouldn't necessarily do all 4 of them, but I find a staccato and sustain works quite well sometimes. So you have very quick access to the different articulations. Now, a lot of folks, one question I get is, you've just loaded up 4 different piccolos. Isn't that repeating and taking up more and more RAM by loading up more and more instances? The thing to notice here is if I delete these, I'll lose all my fancy naming, but yes, let's, oh no, I don't want to save. Just go away. No. Notice that my RAM is not going down. It goes down when I unload the last one, my first piccolo instrument. But as I load up each one of these, check out my RAM here. As I load up the first one, it loads up 17 megabytes. But as I load up 2, 3, and 4, it doesn't add any more RAM in there. One of the very smart things about Contact is that if it's the same instrument, if the samples are already loaded up, then it doesn't repeat the overall RAM. It just uses the same samples. The other question is, why use different MIDI channels? What about key switching? One very common way of getting access to all of these articulations is to use key switching, which is an octave, some octave down, typically way down below, that allows you to switch between staccato and sustain and all the different articulations. And that is completely valid. It's a very common way of accessing different articulations. And there is no one way better than the other. The things that I don't like about key switching is that you have to chase key switches, which means that sometimes you have to jump back earlier in the song to make sure you roll through that key switch so that you hear the correct sound when playing back. As I mentioned, you can layer multiple key articulations together in this setup. So, however it works. The other thing to point out here, in this assignment, very early on slide 3, it says, warning, you will run out of memory at some point in this project. You can very quickly load up lots of different samples, lots of different sounds, and depending on how much RAM you have in your computer can start sweating and getting a bit slower and kind of working real hard to load up this session. So there are ways around this problem of running out of RAM. So I've only used 17 megabytes from this Piccolo, but as I load up more and more instruments, it takes up about, what did I find? 200 or 300 gigs, 200, 300 megabytes to load up all these sounds, and it might cause some issues. So in order to help this process, what we're going to do each time is we're going to save contact setup as a preset. You're going to go to File, and you're going to do Save Multi-As. Just a bit of language here. These are individual contact instruments. Those instruments are put together in a multi or a multi-rack. And so to save the setup of all 4 of these together, you want to do Save Multi-As. And then you are going to save this. You'll save it back to your folder. I think you call it something like Orchestral Piccolo. And you save it back to whatever session you want, or the session. Once you save that preset, you're going to choose Reset Multi from the File menu. This unloads contact samples and frees up memory. So what you're going to do is you're going to clear everything out. You're going to do Reset Multi. It says, are you sure you're going to erase everything? And you say, of course, that's no problem because I just saved a preset. Then you're going to save the session with everything blanked out. And if you ever need it again, you can go to File, Load Recent, and I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, well, whichever one, wherever you saved it, it would bring back the preset that you correctly saved. So that is going to help the session overall. Then you have some routing for all of your files, for all of your tracks. You're going to create masters. We have a wind master, a brass master, and a string master. Those are each on bus 1, 2, and 3. You're going to take all of your winds, and you're going to bus them all to bus 1. And that's going to go to your winds master. Then you're going to take all of your brass, and you're going to go to bus 2, and that'll be your brass master. Then you take all of your strings, and you go to bus 3, and that becomes your string master. Then you take all of them, and they all go to bus 4, and that's your reverb. Every track should get an EQ and a compressor. They should all be turned off and flattened out until you actually need them. Then everything is on bus 4, and bus 4 goes to a space designer, EQ, all of those fun things. You're going to color code your session. Make sure it's all nicely set up for you to work with. So hopefully that gives you overall, I mean, the PDF should lead you quite nicely through how everything is set up and how it's all going to work. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions or issues on that. All right, so that is your new week's assignments for week 3. Week 4, we still have no new game composition, but we do have production technique and technical assignment, and our focus is more towards how to set up and position all of the materials that you've worked on and get it ready to demonstrate it out in the industry and find clients and start building those client relationships. Okie dokie. Week 3 discussion taken care of. Let's check out our week 2 submissions. We have 4 here that represent the action cues, the ambient cues, and the stingers. Let me just kind of organize these really quickly. We've got all of our stingers over here. We've got our action cues. And we have our ambient cues. Just one of those. So we'll talk about our game composition. Let me just bring something else up here. All right, so we did that. We did our week 3 production technique. We did our sound design. Let's see here. Hold on. We want week 2 stuff for a sec. So you've done your first round of revisions. You've got your second week under your belt. Got a new round of assignments for week 3. So we're certainly hit our full pace through the month. It really does kind of peak in the level of work and the amount of material. All right, so let's talk about your production technique and your technical assignment really quick. These things will be rolling in through this week. Your technical assignments. Sorry, one more time. Your production techniques, the chiptune retro assignment is typically people do quite well on that. It's really more about the restrictions of the assignment of the kind of retro gaming music style, using the provided sound banks, using the limitation of 4 instrument tracks, 4 simultaneous voices. So most people do just fine in the creation and formatting of the file, solid length, using the provided sound banks. This is real obvious, right? If somebody doesn't use the retro sounds, it really sticks out. Limit of 4 tracks. You can have more, but only 4 of them are simultaneous. Use melodic instrumentation. There needs to be melody at some point. There needs to be percussion at some point, and there needs to be a change in the lead melodic instrument so that you have some variation, and these 4 voices had the ability of switching sounds simultaneously or at any point necessary. And then delivering a screenshot, overall composition and mix. Leave those pretty open to interpretation. Mostly it's about using the limitations that were provided. The technical assignment, these are 3 columns for your sound effects. Were they delivered? Meaning, does the file exist and is the content of that file correct? Right? Is it a bomb explosion or an enemy death sound or a jump or an ouch or a taunt? Most of the time that is, they fit the bill nicely, but every once in a while you get something where the file's just completely muted, like it's just silence, or it's just, it says taunt and you hear a gunshot or something like that. It's completely wrong. So not only is the file exist, but the content of that file is correct. Is it formatted correctly? 16-bit, 44:1 stereo files and named properly. And then it is appropriate. And again, I leave that really wide open for interpretation, but it's does it make sense in the context of what the sound is supposed to be? So those are your production techniques and your technical assignment and things to expect from that. What was that? Come on, selection. Your Angry Bots composition. Again, it breaks down into ambient, 3 action cues, and the stinger cues. The main thing that we are listening for is an intensity level difference. The ambient cues and the action cues represent different points in the game. And you have your ambient cue represents a lower intensity level. It still should have, it shouldn't be a drone or something that's boring or doesn't evolve or change. It should have some variation. It should have some evolution of the tone and the timbre and the like the core progression that it's following. But however big and loud the ambient is, the action cue just needs to be bigger and stronger than that. So that means percussion and bass and typically a strong harmony and melody lines that fit the different cues overall. The ambient cues are around a minute long. The action cues are 8 bars long. And then the stingers are meant to be, they're meant for emphasis, and they are meant for a bit of variation as you transfer from one cue to the next. So just taking a look at these real quick, and we'll just do the visual part of it first. Each one of these look like it has a pretty strong level. Maybe this one could come up just a bit, but of course we should best to listen to it. There's no really big gaps. Well, actually this one here fades out. You're going to watch out for things that fade to an ending because it's just going to loop over again and start. So you want to make sure, like this one is all the way to the end, this one's all the way to the end. You want to make sure that the ambient cues are set up to loop properly. Strong levels. I mean, if I could just guess from the waveforms, it looks like there's some change in there, but absolutely we need to check and listen to it. The action cues, we want to make sure that these all loop, right? These are all strong levels. We want to watch out, and we want to make sure that they're not overloading and clipping. They do have a bit of a 2x4 kind of look to them where they're just solid all the way across. But it also could be down to the style of music. Certainly strong electronic music is often very heavily compressed. So the main thing is, like, this one is lower in level, but these are also lower in level. So generally that's good. You don't want the ambient cues to ever be louder than the action cues. Actually, like this. This ambient cue has a stronger level, probably has more bass in the sounds overall. And these come in, then they have a less of a presence or volume, less power. So we'll want to watch out for that in dynamics. You also want to make sure, again, that they loop so that there's no gaps at the end of the files. These all look pretty solid in that respect. And then each one of them needs to have their own voice, their own unique robot theme to them that whenever you hear it, it makes it very identifiable to the individual robot that it comes from. Your stinger cues are 3 cues that are going to they hit pretty hard in the beginning, which means they need to have a strong attack, and then they're going to fade out to silence, or they're going to reach silence before the end of the file. So the shape, at least of this stinger, looks pretty solid. Maybe this one over here. These are good because they start out stronger than they end, and they do fade to silence, but they're pretty low in volume. All 3 of these, this one especially is quite low in volume. So certainly we'll take a listen to this, but remember these stingers are going to be played on top of or along with the action cues. So you don't want them to get buried, but you also don't want them to kind of interrupt the flow or cause any trouble when played. So that is all just straight looking at it. Visuals on all of the files, but of course that means nothing when you actually listen to it and we can figure out how well it works together. So before I start in on this, actually no, I'll hit play on the first one and then take a quick pause. We'll listen to it for a moment and then we'll come back and we'll discuss it. All right, let's try it. Oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try this. There we go. Let that roll for a little bit. loop here. All right, very good. Good stuff, right? So definitely a pace or a pulse to it. There's the fast kind of arpeggiated lines, really kind of push it forward. You got the bit more percussion coming in later on. Pretty good level overall. I'd say, I guess you could have just a few dB on that, but that's pretty much fine, just as long as these would probably be louder overall. Alright, so good foundation, good instrumentation used there. Let's jump directly to our first robot. Alright, now the main problem I have is that it really sounds really quite similar, and it's probably because of that arpeggiator. Now, it's good to have similar instruments from one to the next, but there's such a strong pattern. Come on. Such a strong pattern here with that arpeggiator that there's not enough difference over here. I hear that bass, which is cool, but the drums are very similar. There's nothing at the higher registers. There's not too much to make it feel separate from the ambient cue. Mech. Oh, well, there's stuff in the right channel. I guess it helps to have both speakers on, but you don't want anything that's really hard panned, or maybe that hard panned. Yeah, it's almost sitting in the right channel only. Well, let me go back over here. Yeah, there's something over there, but it feels like a repeating arpeggiator too. Yeah, there's some good melodic lines there. Bring it towards the center, bring it up in the mix so it's more of the focus, and then change the foundation, or like the base layers of arpeggiator pads and some of that percussion to give them a more unique and more separation from one to the next. These, I think, are going to not be very loud or strong. Let's see what these are. Right, this first one works the best. This could definitely be a layer along with some, like a big kick and a cymbal crash and maybe a bass hit into a whole bunch of reverbs because it's got a really cool kind of sound. You want to watch out a bit for things that are arpeggiated or gated or rhythmic, because it has the possibility of clashing with the other cues. Even if it's set at the right or same tempo, it might not play exactly on beat with the other. These sound more like sound effects. Again, it could be one layer, but it needs a whole lot more musical elements. It needs drums, bass, and like some cool synth element that makes it unique. So these will be lost in volume in the mix against these action cues, so they definitely need more level overall. All right. Cool instruments, good pacing through the cue, just some tweaks to the instrumentation and some of the mix elements. All right, let's jump to this one and we'll do a loop. Little sparse to start it out, need more stuff. I bet you that stuff's coming. All right, drums, a little bit of synth, a little bass. Lead line. Alright, it's getting there. It's getting more dense, more instrumentation. I like now that we have a lead, we have a progression. I'm getting a feel of kind of 4-bar phrases. Then it changes, then another kind of phrase, then it changes the instrumentation. It's dropped down pretty far. I feel like it's going to build back up. Let's see. Yep, bass. Feels pretty similar in the first half to the second half, right? If I go here, here, like here. There we go. So I'm going to need more variation in the first half and second half. And also, I would avoid the building up instrument by instrument, because once you get around here, you have good instrumentation, good stuff going on, lots of elements, and I would really say that this kind of stuff should be all the way through, and you are manipulating it and varying it. You can certainly add and subtract things, but I wouldn't start and say drums, and then more drums, and then bass, and then more drums, and then lead line, and then synth pad, and then do it all over again. You want to maintain consistency, because by doing it this way, you basically have divided this up into 2 halves. And I know when I start over again that I'm in for the second half before it becomes like obvious road markers along the path that tell you where you're at. All right, so by the time you get here, you got a solid groove and good instrumentation. So I develop those ideas through the cues. And then we'll jump to the action here. Buzzer. Cool. I bring up the drums. Actually, maybe not. Cool. Change. I like the kind of sweet back and forth. It's like a melodic alarm. Spider cue. Alright, so each one of them has unique percussion, progression, melody. They're a bit repetitive in their phrasing, where you repeat the same, even if you move it to a new chord. Well, this one's got a stronger melody. This one, kind of going back and forth, just moving to a new chord. This one repeats a bit with that arpeggio. So these are just kind of more smaller nuanced points for the action cues. Let's take a listen to the 3 stingers. Cool. I like that. This one, you should probably avoid like this gap in between. Oops. Combine them together, or just I wouldn't have a sound and then another sound. Okay, I would probably like a little bit more percussion in this. Almost just a sound effect, but just even adding a big kick into some reverb might help that. That's kind of what this one feels like. All right, so those work well. Good elements, good instrumentation, good ideas through the ambient cue. Just watch a little of the repetition on in the compositions. All right, next, ambient. Okay, we got some pad lines. I wouldn't start with the drums and then immediately take them out. All right. Got something else there. Cool. I like the sounds and the progression. Got a little bit of a pace back there. With the long sustained pads, you should have something that feels a little bit more staccato, a bit more movement. The bass line is doing some of that, but it is kind of way back there in the low range. I like the lead line. The drums feel like they're doubled and kind of rhythmically offset. Like every time I hear two snare hits really close to each other. And then watch for the fade. You're going to want to, let's see, somewhere maybe like there. Let's see how poorly I did. You would, of course, spend more than 5 seconds to find the edit point to make that loop smoothly, but you want to always make sure that there's no gaps at the end of the file there. All right, we'll jump over here. There is a lot of bass and instrumentations from the pads that fill up and create more volume here. We want to make sure these need to be louder overall. Oh, metronome. Not me. All right, so drums, more power. Everything sounds very small because it's kind of behind the... try using similar instrumentation to the ambient cue so that there is more consistency as it transfers over. Along with the drums. Up, and then metronome in there. That's going to be a problem. I don't hear it in here. So more level and more consistency in the instrumentation, and make sure each one of the cues are set up to loop. Let's try this. All right, watch out for the metronome. Don't make them little musical phrases like that. They want to. It needs to be hit instantly and then kind of get out. That's pretty good, even though it had like the kick snare, has a little bit of rhythm, but it gets out of the way much quicker. I like the sounds in there though. I like that kind of tremoloed synth. All right, so good elements. I like the ambient cue the most, and you should take some of these ideas and apply it through these. Watch the loops, watch the edits, get some more power from the stinger cues. And we're going to try one more here. Just visually, the thing that throws me off is it looks like there's less instrumentation here, and then maybe a drum beat comes through, plays all the way through, gets to the end, and then it's going to drop out again every single time. So watch out for those kind of dynamic and level changes through the cues. One more ambient. All right, some light percussion, some pads, kicks come in, some arpeggiated synths, good textures, got a bass line happening, good stuff happening through here. A lot of times it's about like the textures and the timbres of the instrumentation as much as it is melody and harmony. Cool. See how this loops? So actually that worked pretty smoothly overall. The instrumentation is sporadic enough that it fits quite well. Alright, we'll jump over to these action cues. Cool. Got this lead synth line. Got some percussion and pads in there. Maybe a little bit more from the percussion and the drums. And kind of double it up in the pacing. Maybe it does that in some of the other cues. This one's a little dissonant from the arpeggiator. It really just feels like a hi-hat. Am I missing kick and snare? And it sounds like there's a side stick in there, but I need just big drums, a lot more faster pacing. It feels just kind of on that quarter note hi-hat. Alright, this one's got a little bit more power. It's got that snare. Interesting lead sound. Alright, so maybe just overall more power, more kind of pushing the pacing forward from the tempo of added percussion. And 3 stingers. Alright, kind of sound like synthy sound effects, which means that they would be good as layers with added impact from kicks, big cymbal crashes, big bass hits, and then this adds the unique texture, right? It shouldn't just be a kick and a crash. That's this kind of the bottom floor of interest for stingers. It should have some cool modulated kind of synthy tones in it, but it also needs that hit and impact. All right, good stuff overall to pay attention to. Gives us a couple of things as a group to point out, to change. Most of all of them didn't need any fundamental changes. It's just taking what you're doing and pushing it a bit further overall. All right, so that will wrap it up for our review and for week 2 and week 3. Certainly enough for me, from me. Thanks for sticking around. We will meet again on Thursday and start talking about what happens to your music as it gets and used in the game. But again, download the assignments, check it all out, get in contact with me if you have any sort of issues. And other than that, I will see you again on Thursday. Have a good evening. Here in the chat, David, do I have any recommendations with the volume, with the volumes we bounce at? I noticed that when I bounce out, bouncing off the zeros, like we were taught, it comes out loud. Let's see. The way I would recommend, let me go back here. Yes, here. What I would do, in my not so short answer to this, is I like to go into metering and put on a multimeter on my stereo output. And what you were like, the difference between something like this and something like this is the difference between your peak and RMS levels. Let's see, will I still get a meter without blasting everything? How do I get pre-faders? Track, pre-mix, pre-fader metering. I could even switches where my meters are. Hello. Okay. Pre-fader metering. Okay, let me say it here. Angela, am I understanding you correctly? The robot cues should have more melodic feel. Okay. So volumes. What you are seeing here when you see something that comes off pretty loud, pretty strong waveform, is the difference between your peak levels and your RMS level or your average level. Your peak levels are the higher levels, and your average level, your peak levels are the high levels. These typically represent your kicks, snares, and bass. Real big, loud, heavy instruments. Your average represents typically everything else, which is melody and harmony and things that are not so percussive and strong. When you add in a compressor, let's do this. Since something is already maybe highly compressed and limited, you can't really undo it so much. So I'm going to go down to here, and I'm going to throw on a compressor here and see what it does to my meters. Dynamics compressor, didn't that work? All right, so, oh my goodness, that's super huge. And that's his, oh, there we go. So I'm going to take my threshold to 0 and my attack to 1. I'm going to basically turn off everything. Makeup gain 0. All right, and this and this, and okay. So you can see here, the peak level and the average level is way, way different. Like versus this one up here. Oh goodness, am I even going to be able to do all of this simultaneously? So this is that one, and if I throw in, mute this one, throw this one in there. What's playing? Where am I metering? Mute. Mute. Whoa. Everything's muted. What am I playing? Oh, because it's pre-fader. Sorry. Why is this one player? That's so weird. What am I saying? Anyway. Is it this one? No. So if I go to this particular piece, oh, is that my flipping click? Sorry about that. That's what I was like, what is that I see in the meters? Okay, so this one, this piece of music has compression, and you can see the difference where it probably has compression and limiting. So its peaks at 0, and the average level is pretty solid right next to it. But if I mute that one and bring this one up, the difference between the peaks and the average level is much bigger. And so if I throw a compressor on this one, and I compress it, and watch the needle here and watch the values here. I'll even turn on my limiter so I can squash the heck out of it if I need to. But I'll take my threshold down. Actually, I'll take my ratio at about 3 to 1, and I'll start bringing my threshold down. And you'll see that it's going to start bouncing. And as I get closer and closer, is this going to loop? Yeah. The gaps, notice that my average level rises up, and then the gaps are kind of getting squashed, and it's getting smaller and smaller. And then once I bring up my makeup gain, good gosh, I hope okay, it's still quiet. But as I bring up my makeup gain, I'm basically bringing up my average level because I'm pushing my limiter so hard that it's basically squashing at 0 and stopping, and I can keep cranking up this output and basically make up my average level versus my peak level. So it's typically a pretty good idea to use limiting and compression on your master output. along with a main meter. It's very dangerous because you can very quickly overcompress things. But it is a balance, and it's something that you typically, while you're learning, you typically either don't compress or don't compress enough, or you just overcompress and squash the ever living out of everything, and you get those kind of 2x4 waveforms. It's different per genre of music. It's different because we're using synths versus recorded audio, and the way that compressors are and limiters and dynamics processors work is the difference. So my short answer of how to get the proper levels is that you want to fill up the meter, bouncing close to zero. You want to make sure that it's that your average level and your peak level are within like 5 or 10 dB worth of each other, so that that it will have a good representation of both levels. One element is don't use your eyes at all and just just use your ears. And then other times don't use your ears and just use your eyes and watch the meters and see how they all work together. David here in the chat, I didn't use a compressor. That's what I mean. So if that's the case, then it could just be that you're just, if you use no compression or limiting on the overall project, that probably means is you're just pushing the master output a whole bunch, and it's just kind of squashing the overall output as it goes through that. But you definitely, the main thing is to have a meter on your master output so that you're constantly watching that and the levels, so that you don't wait until the bounce to realize that everything's completely squashed. So compression and limiting is dynamics processing, and is one of the more difficult concepts to learn in audio production. And it's fun thing about compression is that it's one of those sounds that if you hear it, it's too much, and that's kind of really difficult to wrap your head around. So it's just a combination of the watching the meters and listening to the music overall. All right, hopefully that gives you some guidelines to go by for your final level, final output. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up there, and I will see you guys again next time. Thanks a lot.